Hey, you crypto people, among token holders, and all the people just entering the cryptosphere. This is Korean, and I am back with the jam-packed third episode of our popular podcast. This episode was recorded on August 12th, 2021. Today, we interview our research lead at 𝕉𝕉𝕝𝕉 𝕉𝕉. Originally from France, but living in England. He fills us in on the remaining 4 tokens that comprise DFI. These are Maker, Compound, The Graph, and Yearn Finance. This is a great show if you want to learn more about DFI or just these tokens. We also announce our writing contest here at 𝕉𝕉𝕝𝕉 where you get to win up to $1,000 in prizes. That is awesome! Check out our Discord and Telegram for that. We end off the show talking about the hottest news of the week. Of course, the polyhack, US infrastructure bill, and something upbeat. If you're worried about any of these things, this is the show to listen to, so do not stop listening. A wonderful article from Morning Brew ends off the show talking about the top 7 countries who use crypto the most. Thanks everyone for listening. Don't forget to tune in next week when we interview another member of the team and get their insights into our other token. We talked about this on the first episode, DMX. Hi everyone, it is Wednesday afternoon here in Taiwan and we are back with our third podcast. We are picking up speed. How do you like it? If you'd like to leave us feedback, please follow us on any one of our social media channels and send us a message. You will find these in the show notes and at the end of the podcast. Today, I'm here with another member of the research team, Ellie. Some part of me keeps wanting to say Eli, but it's Ellie. I'm going to focus on trying not to make this mistake. Before we get on with the podcast, I want to mention something. So I'm sorry to interrupt our typical podcast, but I'm going to bring you some exciting news. Some of you might already know, but here at 𝕉𝕉𝕝𝕉, we are running an awesome crypto writing competition. There's a prize pool for 1,000 US DFI tokens. First place gets 500, second 300, third 200. Now I know what you're thinking. Writing is difficult and not worth it. It's boring. But if you're just starting out into crypto and you want to get some exposure, this is a perfect chance for you to grab some really interesting tokens that cover you in a lot of ways. If you'd like to know more details about the competition, head over to our Discord or Telegram. You can message me, Korean P, or you can message our community manager, David at Bubana. I can't wait to read your articles. Now let's get back to the show. Just like in previous weeks, Ellie, do you want to introduce yourself? Tell us what makes Ellie Ellie?
Sure. Thanks for having me, first of all. So my full name is Eliza. You guys can call me Eddie. I'm originally from France. I'm leading the research team at 𝕉𝕉𝕝𝕉. My background is in venture capital, and my journey in crypto started about 8 years ago. And I've been super passionate about the whole space for the past 8 years, and I'm super excited to do that on a daily basis to fulfill my passion for crypto.
And I'm looking forward to hearing more about your story. But as much as I'd like to talk more about you and your background and everything, we've got to get started. I don't want to keep you too long. So, Ellie, I'm glad you're here. So Zoe was here last week. She did a really amazing job. As much as she would deny, she's like, oh my God, it was terrible. But I thought she did really, really well. And so today you're going to talk about the other 4 tokens that comprise part of DFI. Again, if you just listening to this the first time, you should definitely go back, listen to Zoe's episode, or even go back further, listen to James's episode where he talks about DFI, what DFI does, what is part of DFI. And here we're lucky to have Ellie today. He's going to talk about the other 4 tokens. There are 8 tokens that make up DFI. And so Ellie's going to talk about the other 4, which are Maker, Compound, The Graph, and Yearn Finance. We're going to start off with Maker today. So Ellie, why don't you fill us in on Maker, what it is,
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, first of all of these 4 tokens, they have one thing in common. They are decentralized autonomous organizations, and they are run by smart contracts. So instead of having a board member running the organization and driving the strategy, we have basically a full army of a community based around the world, regardless of their location, provide some insights and to try to improve the protocol and come up with features, etc. So Maker is also a DAO, so a decentralized autonomous organization, and they are the issuer of a stablecoin. So stablecoins are synthetic dollars that could be transferred on the blockchain in a very seamless way. So you don't have to run through specific banks to wait for the opening hours from 9 to 5 in order to transact, or just waiting for Monday because it's closed during the weekend. So basically, it's like this decentralized payment network, but mainly for transferring dollars, because the stablecoin on Maker called DAI, DAI, is basically based on the value of $1. So if you transfer me $1,000 today, the value would not change. And that's a major improvement compared to volatile assets such as Ether and Bitcoin, because with DAI, compared to all the competitors, because there are many stablecoin competitors as well, the DAI is essentially a decentralized issuer where people can provide collateral in order to maintain the peg to the US dollar. Compared to, for example, USDC or Tether, mainly owned by a centralized company such as, for example, Circle or Bitfinex, these centralized stablecoins can essentially frozen your accounts if, for example, you're a bad actor, or, for example, if you don't comply with the specific set of rules that they have. But with DAI, anyone can have access to the payment network. You don't have, you're not basically running into censorship that could be happening on Tether or USDC. And we're going to talk about this further down, actually, on the news section in this podcast, because they are able to frozen the accounts of a specific hacker. But with DAI, essentially, you basically have this, a network of people that provide, improvements to the network, and they do that with the share of the network called Maker, so MKR. That's the ticker of the token. And they vote for, improving the network. They vote for maybe having new constituents in order to maintain the peg to $1, because there is not just, Bitcoin, Ether, and, for example, Gemini dollars or Tether in the constituents, but there is much more. There is a plethora of multiple constituents to maintain the peg to $1. So that's essentially the first use case of Maker. So providing access to this payment network that is maintained to $1 to avoid volatility. And then the other one is providing lending, where people can have access to loans. But these loans are not under collateralized. They are over collateralized because there is multiple constituents on the Maker network that are essentially, quite volatile, such as, for example, Ether. So, for example, if you want to have a loan of, let's say, 1,000 Ether, basically the collateral, so the liquidity ratio would be 150%. So for every dollar, you have to provide $1.50 worth of collateral in order to have access to that loan. That's made this way because crypto assets are extremely volatile, but that's a major, I would say, impediment if you want to have access to microloans in many places, especially in emerging nations. But there is, multiple protocols that tries to improve that, such as, for example, flash loans on Aave, where, within a block, you're able to have access to a loan that is non-collateralized. But obviously, it's within seconds, so it's more accessible to developers and entrepreneurs.
Wow, that was a very comprehensive explanation. And so, I asked Zoe very similar questions last week. If you're a regular crypto user, why would you be using Maker, or why would you be investing in Maker? What makes Maker special? Beyond the, being decentralized, beyond having, the DAI stablecoin. In your opinion, what makes Maker special?
I think what makes Maker extremely special is the fact that anyone can have access to a stable token, especially if they need to move money around. And we see that, for example, in Venezuela, in Hong Kong, in Nigeria, where people don't have access to traditional bank accounts. They live under a potentially an oppressive government, and they need to move money around. If they leave the country with nothing, with Maker, especially with DAI, they're able to have access to the entirety of their wealth in a single wallet. And if they have access to an internet connection, they are able to access it. And it's very important because essentially DAI has I think a variety of constituents in order to maintain the peg. It's not just relying on a network of banking relationships as we see with USDC or Tether, where they have to basically, make sure that they have the banks in their networks that, store the real dollars for every single dollar that are basically exchanged on the blockchain. And for example, with Tether, we've seen that there's been quite problematic in their history, where they had no banking relationship for a certain amount of time, and that's basically I would say the weakness of that system. But with DAI, it's completely different. The system itself provides more censorship resistance compared to the competitors, and the total addressable market for that is billions of people that do not have access to traditional financial services, and not just like the remittances market that transacts billions of dollars on a yearly basis, but also having access to loans for many people around the world, for having access to maybe like a mortgage, or maybe having access to a car. And we see that, for example, in Hong Kong. If you're based in Hong Kong and you need to have a mortgage, you have to have an employment contract to essentially be eligible to get a loan. But with DeFi, you don't provide your personal information. You can have access to anything that you need, as long as obviously you comply with the liquidation ratio, which is basically the collateral that you need to put in order to have access to the loan. And obviously you need to refill in order to make sure that you meet that limit of 150%, for example, with Ether, if you want to have access to a DAI denominated.
Thank you. I mean, that definitely makes things very unique. And you made like really two good points, which is accessibility. And you mentioned about Hong Kong and Asia. I used to live in Korea before Taiwan. And here, I mean, buying a house is extremely difficult because
Absolutely.
we're 23 million people in Taiwan on an island the same size as the city I used to come live in South Africa. But that place only has like 4 million people, and we're 23 million squeezed into the land. So property is crazy here, and getting a loan is even more difficult. So that is wonderful. Thanks for explaining, Maker. Okay, so we've got three more, and we're going to move on to, this would be number six.
Yep.
All right, number 6 is Compound. So tell us about Compound. Fill us in on what it is for people who don't know.
Yep. So Compound has a lot of similarities with Maker, but it's not a stablecoin issuer, but it's a lending and borrowing platform. So the same philosophy, but quite different, because on Compound, if you provide, let's say, some Ether to the platform, you're receiving a C token, which is basically the representation of the capital that you have in the protocol, plus the accrued interest that is basically filled up to your wallet at every block of transactions on the Ethereum blockchain. So all of these protocols that we're going to talk about, so Maker, Compound, the Graph, and Yearn, they are all built on Ethereum. So for Maker, in order to accrue the interest to your holdings, it's at every single block of transactions. So on average, 15 seconds. But usually when you go on the website, you see the APY, so your interest rate on a yearly basis. But that's obviously, based on supply and demand on the network to essentially provide the interest rate. So the interest rate is quite flexible, not fixed.
Oh, okay. Interesting. As we've been talking about this, I've sort of like come to the realization myself that these things are somewhat similar. I mean, if you're looking, talking about the other 4 tokens as well, which is, so we talked about Chainlink. Chainlink doesn't count. But she talked about Aave as well. So Aave, Compound, Maker.
Mm-hmm.
Is, if you were looking for a loan, how would you make a decision between the 3?
I think it will really depend on what the type of traders people are. So if you're sort of like an advanced trader and a short-term one, and there is an arbitrage opportunity between different pools, a lot of traders would be more comfortable, especially if they have technical skills, to use Aave for flash loans. So flash loans, to reiterate, are essentially non-collateralized loans on the Aave network that you need to repay before the end of the block. So every 15 seconds, you need to repay the loan as fast as possible. So that's what a flash loan is. And there is a lot of arbitrage opportunities, as we've seen, for example, during the Uniswap craze when they launched the token. You saw the gas fees, shooting to the roof. And there was a lot of arbitrage happening, especially the concept called MEVs, for minor exploitable value. where basically there is basically a bunch of arbitrage bots that scan the mempool. So the mempool is essentially the basket on the Ethereum blockchain that combines all the unconfirmed transactions. So what they do is trying to spot the arbitrage opportunity and add more transaction fees so that the new transaction gets prioritized compared to the previous one. So that's basically how MEV plays out on the Ethereum blockchain. And it's called miner because eventually the miners get paid in the collection of transaction fees plus the bulk reward of 2 ETH at the moment. So 2 ETH today, Ethereum trades at 3K, is about $6,000. They receive $6,000 plus the collection of the transaction fees. And that's why we see a lot of arbitrage opportunities where they try to potentially use leverage or use all of these arbitrage opportunities that they see on the mempool. So that's for short-term traders and with advanced skills. And then it will really depend on the interest rates that is available across different protocols. For example, on Maker, potentially the interest rates are lower compared to other pools because on Compound, every borrower and every lender of the network, they receive comp tokens. So the comp token is essentially the governance token that you use first of all as a reward to access the protocol, but also as a right to vote for more upgrades, to vote for features, to improve the network, or even to disperse the funds of the network into different initiatives. So that's why the interests are higher because of the of the price action of the underlying token.
Thanks for explaining. I mean, especially you went into mine extractor valley, which is me as a I have two small mining farms here in Taiwan.
Oh,
It is something that has always interested me, and the way you explained MEV is much simpler than all the explanations I've read online. Um, that would be like the perfect 1 minute video. I might even cut that and make that into something.
super good.
It's
Yes,
Ellie explains MEV in 60 seconds because that was very good. All right, Ellie. Yeah, really, really good. Compound done. We're going to move on to the graph.
Last week, you guys heard about Chainlink, and there is a key difference between Chainlink and the graph. A lot of people try to confuse them, but they are completely different. So Chainlink gets the data from the outside world, such as the weather, the equity market, the bond market, the futures market, for example, for the commodities, and they provide an index which represents the price of these commodities, for example, to the blockchains. So they connect the outside world to the blockchains because by design, the blockchains do not understand or have any interoperability with all the different systems that have access to the outside world. So that's what Chainlink does. And the graph does that, but at the complete side of at the complete opposite side of the spectrum. So essentially, the graph collects all the information for the different projects that are built on Ethereum or even over layer one protocols such as Polkadot, such as Bitcoin, and others, because there is many projects, thousands of projects that are built on these networks, and they have different parameters in order to understand the user activity, in order to understand the progress of these different projects. So essentially, the graph tries to build this network of indexers, curators, and delegators in order to kind of like decentralize the business model of Google, where essentially you would basically have a network of, first of all, projects called subgraph in the network that would basically be plugged into the graph protocol. And then you would have, on the other end, indexers. Indexers would be, query services that would basically collect all of the information from the subgraph in order to give sort of like a classification, a reordering of all the variables that you need to have access to, such as transaction data, such as number of addresses, such as, for example, the number of flash loans, etc. And then you have essentially the indexers that are paid for that, and they're not paid in dollars, they're not paid in Bitcoin, but they're paid in the graph token. And after that, there is a third group of people in the network called the curators. So essentially, all the indexers are trying to compete with one another to provide the best in class data. And the curators are essentially analyzing and assessing all of these different services. The same way, for example, you would provide a review to a specific service on Google. That's basically what curators are doing. Out of 5, let's say, to give you an analogy, out of 5, you would rate indexer number 1 compared to indexer number 2, indexer number 3. And then you have the delegators. And the delegators are people like you and I that are not indexers, they are not curators, they are not subgraphs, but we are just token holders. We might have participated to the token sale. We might have bought the graph on Coinbase, Kraken, or over platforms such as Uniswap. And we just want to earn more of the graph tokens. So we do that by delegating our tokens to indexers, because indexers are the main cash cow of the network, to essentially provide these indexing and querying services to the network. So you would basically choose by the reviews of the curators the best indexers, and then you would delegate to them. The same way, for example, you would delegate some Ethereum tokens 2.0 to Kraken or to Lido in order to earn more tokens going forward.
Yeah, you've just explained a lot. I just sort of came upon the graph recently as well, and purchased some tokens without really understanding too much what it does. And now I understand. I'm like, you've just blown my mind. I used to think they were similar to Chainlink, but now really they're different. So to explain the graph in a very simple sense, if this is possible, you can correct me if I'm wrong. You're the expert. The graph is just like you compared it to Google twice. It's just like what Google is, which Google is a search engine that indexes the web, and the graph is the same thing that indexes the blockchain.
Exactly, and the different blockchains. So it's not. I think it's a network that is blockchain agnostic and not specialized just for Ethereum, but also accessible on the Polkadot network, on the Bitcoin blockchain, and others down the line. They're also trying to connect with layer 2s and sidechains, because sidechains, in a sense, they're also different layer 1s in order to remove the computation, remove the storage off of the layer 1 to increase the scalability. So the graph is trying to potentially access the next wave of the internet and give you the accessibility to the data for that.
I'm not sure if you know this offhand. Do you know which is newer? Is Chainlink older, or is the graph older, or about the same age as far as in the blockchain ecosystem?
Yeah, so Chainlink is definitely older. They had their token sale in 2017. The graph had a private token sale early, I think, in 2020, and they had a public one in late 2020. And they finally launched in December 2020, early 2021. So definitely earlier, but they've been around for a long time. I think over the past 2 years, they were able to have these DeFi projects programming on the graph protocol as a subgraph, and then having these indexers, making sure that they can collect the right information for the different projects. And it's really good because essentially it's impossible to standardize the access to the different DeFi projects and also the Web3 projects. So the graph really combines everything into one, so that you can query all of that information into one interface, right? Instead of trying to connect on Uniswap and maybe they have a dashboard and you have access to that data, or you just try to investigate Etherscan. Everything is there on the graph. Basically, saving a lot of time and making the life easier for many researchers and also for entrepreneurs that build on the blockchain.
And I think that's what we need as well. I mean, while you and I are willing to go through the complexity sometimes that's involved in crypto, I think a lot of people that we want to get into, not just Amun's ecosystem, but just crypto in general, they're just, oh my God, this is too hard. Wallets, even though James pointed out in episode 1, it's 5 minutes, to set up a MetaMask wallet,
Yeah.
But then purchasing the crypto, sending it to your wallet from a centralized exchange, or figuring all of that out, and then security and passwords.
Absolutely.
I think we're definitely on the way to something hopefully simpler and expanding the cryptoverse in a positive way, and incorporating more people. But we'll talk about that maybe towards the end. Okay, and then Ellie, you are almost done. The last one is Yearn Finance.
So Yearn, I like to use analogy, and I would compare Yearn to these decentralized commercial bank or investment bank. I would say more decentralized investment bank, And you basically provide tokens where you want to invest in the best in class investment strategies, or you want to earn the best interest rates. So they have multiple products. So there are three, but the biggest ones I would say are Earn and then is Vault. So Vaults are basically these pools where you provide your tokens. What the pool does is providing you with the best investment strategy based on your risk profile. And then you have Earn, and Earn is the first ever product launched by Yearn Finance, where you basically have these different projects that provide lending and borrowing, as we mentioned with Maker and Compound and ℕ𝕖𝕕. And Maker, Yearn Finance, what it does is providing you into one vault the best interest rate. So you provide, for example, USDC, or you provide, for example, DAI. The algorithm would search for the best interest rates in the moment. And this is such a great product because a lot of people are looking for arbitrage opportunities to find the best interest rates, but also there is a lot of risk when you see, for example, 3, 4, or 5 figures of interest rates, just like insane. But because there is the tokens, actually the native tokens of the protocols that provide higher interest rates, but also there is technological risk where there could be a hack. And that's why Yearn Finance just scans all of these different protocols to provide you with the best interest rates or the best investment strategies for the first product called Vaults. And then you have Zap, and the Zap is basically collecting different transactions, so bundling all the transactions together and making sure that in one click, it's saving you a lot of gas fees to transact large amounts. So that's what Yearn does in a nutshell. And obviously they have also a token, and the token is a governance token called YFI, and there is a limit to that governance token. There is only 30,000 tokens available on Earth. So very, very much limited. That's why the unit price of YFI is quite high. And a lot of people in the past were asking why is it worth more than Bitcoin? Because at some point last year, YFI was like 25K and Bitcoin was maybe trading around 14. And a lot of customers were asking like, why is it trading more? It's definitely because of the limited supply. But that doesn't mean that the market cap is higher than Bitcoin. But so YFI has the same philosophy. So you essentially vote for protocol upgrades, you vote for initiatives, or you vote for new features, or even new constituents in the vaults in order to provide the best-in-class investment strategies or the best interest rates if you want to add a new protocol.
I have a quick question because I've seen this, when I got into crypto, I started off on Binance because it's the easiest thing here. Yep. And my reading Chinese is kind of bad, even though I've lived in Taiwan for 12 years. So for YFI, Yearn Finance, right? Yep. I've noticed in Binance, it's like YFI 1 and 2 and 3. Is there a reason for that?
On Binance, you see YFI 1, 2, and 3.
Yes.
So maybe that's on Binance, because if you go on over exchanges, you just have Wi-Fi and you're going to have access to that. Maybe they categorized Wi-Fi by the different versions that were released, very similar to Uniswap V1, Uniswap V2, and Uniswap V3.
That makes sense.
But I think that's how they categorize Wi-Fi. But there is no such thing as different tokens.
I was just curious. It's one of those things that I've always seen. I meant to Google it at some point, but just never had the time to do it. All right. Thanks for explaining the last 4 tokens that are part of DFI. Sure. One of them is probably a really great token if you're just looking to get into crypto. And as usual, we're at the part of the show where we get to talk about the latest news. And there was hot news from yesterday. Yep. It was like 11 p.m. or 12 p.m. I think when we finished with the meeting last night. And I was like scrolling through my Twitter when I went to bed, and it was like $600 million hack. And I'm going to bring up the picture right here so our viewers can have a look as well. Do you want to tell us the Poly hack, and is Poly the same as Polygon? I've got questions from friends about that. Fill the regular people in.
I think a lot of people yesterday discovered what Poly Network was because they never heard of that. But Poly Network is very similar to ThorChain. So it's a cross-chain trading platform because by design, the layer 1 blockchains are not interoperable. And that's why you need such networks like Polkadot or novel technologies like the ThorChain technology or the Poly Network technology to make sure that they can be transacted seamlessly between the Bitcoin network or the Ethereum network. But these, especially for ThorChain and Poly Network, they're quite similar in a sense. They're really trying to make sure that all of these tokens from different blockchains can be transacted seamlessly. And over the past 2 months, 𝕉 had 3 or 4 acts and quite large ones. And the largest now is Poly Network. We don't really understand the root cause of the recent hack for Poly Network. Some coverages said that it was coming from a reversal of the private key of the different token orders. And there were many networks that were hacked. There was USDC, there was Binance Chain, and there was also Ethereum. But in the case, for example, as we mentioned earlier, with centralized stablecoins and decentralized stablecoins, Tether, for example, was able to blacklist completely the Poly Network wallet, which is very interesting because Maker cannot do that. So there is like some benefits to a centralized stablecoin network where they can completely blacklist and frozen the account to make sure that there is no money laundering on centralized exchanges like Bitfinex. But that's definitely the largest hack ever on DeFi. But there is a lot of forensic research and law enforcement involved. And the hacker mentioned that he was willing to return the funds as well because the blockchain, even though the wallet addresses are pseudonymous, it's very easy to make sure that we can track the funds, where they're going. There is an army of people that lost money, unfortunately, so they want to make sure that they can see where the funds are going. So, all eyes on the blockchain for millions of people that have access to crypto. 150 million people just like hearing about this hack and trying to understand what's going on, where the money is going. And obviously there is, blockchain analytics company like Chain Analysis and Elliptic that have advanced products to analyze the trustability of the funds.
I'm going to bring you some regular people questions here. So, I mean, lots of people heard about the 𝕉 hacks, as you mentioned, multiple hacks.
Yep.
And is that a consequence of being chain agnostic or working between different chains? Is it because you can't really create safe solutions to work together, and so there's security risk in being a 𝕉 or in being a polychain?
Yeah, for sure. I would say that these are novel technologies. Unfortunately, there is millions of dollars invested in these networks because people want to really play around, earn interest rates, and are obviously, trying to fulfill their investment strategies. But I think the issue is the fact that these technologies are not always peer reviewed, even though they have audits. There is a certain aspect to the consequences of using these technologies that we don't know in the aftermath, just only in the aftermath of the hack, right? Because there is like a game theory aspect to these kind of hacks that it's only possible to understand in real world conditions. And that's why, for example, Polkadot had a really interesting approach with their network because it's a novel technology. So they have basically these battle testing blockchain called 𝕉𝕬𝕝, where everything could be tested as if it was the real world consequences or the real world conditions of the Polkadot network. And then they would launch the parachains sometime in Q4 this year with everything that they need to have implemented on the mainland. And that's very interesting because I think these networks, that's exactly the approach that they need to undertake in order to avoid such such consequences. But at the same time, there is a good thing is the fact that the whole crypto community, I believe, is really bonded for the greater good, and they really want to make sure that their funds will be returned. They want to make sure that at the end of the day, these hacks are also learning lessons to make sure that they could reinforce their protocols, reinforce their audits, and being more pragmatic when it comes to launching new features or trying to launch things and break things really fast. The ethos of Silicon Valley could be detrimental, especially when the money, millions of dollars are invested in these protocols.
All right, so I'm going to ask the question that's on every regular person's mind, maybe not in my mind, but if you could give our listeners, our viewers who are going to watch the YouTube video later, what is a quick tip or tips to keep your crypto safe? In somebody like you has a lot of experience. What do you suggest for regular people? How do they keep their funds safe?
So all of these protocols are non-custodials. So there is obviously no one that would steal your funds unless there is a third party custodying the assets for you. So that's basically a security hole, number one. But I would say because we have private keys, never ever store your private key online in your laptop. always use, a pen and a paper in order to write it down, or use, metals, metals tablets that are available where you can write the private key, and it's impossible to be inflammable. That's something that people could consider. It's really dense. Obviously, a lot of people don't want to have access to that, but definitely, using these, I would say, secured tablets where anything that could happen to your house, such as a natural disaster or all that, you'd be able to have access to that. Also, make sure that you have backups to your private key. It's very important as well in different geographies, at your parents or at your friends, really people that you trust. But at the same time, when it comes to such hacks on Poly Network and Torchain, there is absolutely nothing that you could do unless we really understand that it's impossible for having a reversal of the private key for these non-custodial services.
Thanks a lot, Lily. I mean, that's satisfying and good to hear. And that'll also make a really cool segment to cut at some point. Okay, we're going to move on to the second news item. The second news item, of course, is the U.S. infrastructure bill. The headline on The Verge reads, Senate approves $1 trillion infrastructure package as crypto worries loom. Some people, of course, have heard about this. For those who haven't heard about this, why is this going to impact the crypto industry? Or is it going to impact? Or the market doesn't show us like anything's being impacted. But what's your opinion?
The issue with the infrastructure bill, and there were many senators that came to an agreement to amend the bill, especially for tax requirements. So essentially, the first bill was defining what's a broker, and the definition was a broker enables the transaction of digital assets and has customers. So they have to fill a specific form called the 1099, where they have to basically make sure that they pay their federal taxes. And essentially, that definition of a broker also applied to non-custodial services, such as, protocol developers, network validators on Polkadot or on Solana or Cosmos, and also applied to Bitcoin miners or Ethereum miners for the proof of stake blockchains, proof of work blockchains, should I say. So that's an issue because all of these services in crypto do not have customers, and they are not enabling the transfer of specific tokens. It's just the protocol, right? So when you take the example of Uniswap Labs is the owner of the interface that you have access to, but they are not the owner of the protocol. So the set of smart contracts that enables the transfer of ERC20s or down the line NFTs, right? So that's two different things. So the Uniswap Lab is an LLC based in the US, and they own the interface, and that's why they need to comply with specific rules in the US, such as the securities laws or the derivative laws with the CFTC. And that's why recently they completely, delisted some tokens that were basically security synthetics on the interface. And unfortunately, if you're transacted security synthetics, you are basically an unregistered security company because you're basically enabling unregistered securities on the network. So that's very important that they make sure that they don't transact anything that could be a security. But the issue is the fact that this bill was making the life completely difficult and also like impossible for miners or validators to collect information, like collecting, the personal information, collecting the cost basis in order to calculate the capital gains. This is completely impossible for non-custodial services, such as, for example, MetaMask, or such as, even like Amun tokens, right? To give you an example. And that's why a lot of crypto companies and associations, especially CoinCenter in the US, they did a really good job to lobby and call the senators around the United States in order to amend and vote for these amendments. But unfortunately, that was 2 days ago. They did not come to an agreement because they had to have a unanimous consent on the bill in order to accept the amendments. But unfortunately, 2 senators refused to move forward. And the bill was actually voted, I think, yesterday night time in London. So I think in the future, we're definitely going to see brand drains going from the US to potentially Canada or over crypto-friendly jurisdictions such as Switzerland or Singapore, or to some extent Germany or even Malta. That's actually where Binance moved from Hong Kong to Malta, because Malta was really embracing the crypto innovation. So that's a possibility. But I would say many entrepreneurs will stay because of talents, because of contributing to the economy, and also I would say that it's not over, because many people can still fight this at the House of Representatives, which is the second half of the Congress in the US, where they are basically enacting the laws in the US. So they can still fight this. It's not over. And I believe that the crypto army, especially in the US, is strong enough and well bonded to move this along.
Yeah, you've summarized everything really well, and more. I haven't heard of some of this stuff, but it makes total sense. Thanks for also giving us an idea of where this is going to go in the future. And I was going to add another story. Let's see if we can squeeze it in. So this is another, maybe a bit more of an upbeat story. It says crypto use by country. This is a story from, it's about 2 days ago, Colleen McFell on a website called Morning Brew. She talks about 7 charts that explain the current state of crypto. And I want to talk about number 7. Number 7 is crypto use by country. And it shows Nigeria, 32%, Vietnam, 21%, Philippines, 20%, Turkey, 16%, Peru, 16%, Switzerland, 11%, and China, 7%. Mm-hmm. And I just wanted to get your take. What do you think, as a final question to round everything out today, in the world, what will we need to do as crypto users currently in order to get more people on board into the crypto sphere?
I would say we need to have user-friendly applications to onboard people, because today, when you open a MetaMask account, you need to write down, the private key on on a piece of paper, or if you don't have basically the indication not to store on your laptop, you basically store it on the Dropbox file, for example. So I think improving the front end of crypto is definitely the next wave of this decade, because we're definitely trying to improve the infrastructure already with, layer 1 interoperability. We see new layer 2 such as zk Sync and Optimism. But at the same time, for example, with the case of Nigeria as number 1 country accessing crypto, we understand that the fact that they were going through police violence last year and they were trying to protest against it, but there was some government intervention mingled into that. The issue was the fact that a lot of associations that were against the police violence and to some extent against the government were having their bank accounts frozen in order to avoid, expanding their operations. And we saw a lot of transactions because these associations were like, okay, we're not able to receive the Nigerian fiat currency, so we're going to receive alternative currencies. Why not Bitcoin? Why not Ethereum? And they received millions of dollars in worth of Bitcoin in order to basically expand their operations and continue to have access to the global economy. And the main issue in these countries, unfortunately, is the fact that shutting down the internet is also a mean of exerting power for governments in order to completely shut down the minority voices, for example. So obviously, crypto relies on the internet. So in these places such as Uganda, Nigeria, or even in Hong Kong, it could be an issue not to have access to the internet because technically you would not be able to have access to crypto. But I believe that within the crypto industry, we need to do a better job at providing user-friendly applications, influenceable, and also most importantly, education. Education will be key to understand these different projects. Obviously, we're all driving cars. We don't need to understand how the engine works, but at the same time, it feels good to drive a car. Whenever we have problems, we go to the mechanician. But at the end of the day, that's what is going to come down to with crypto. We're going to be able to drive these different applications, and whenever we have a problem, we'll be able to find the right people to explain us the different mechanics. But we definitely need to have these kind of cars ready. We have MetaMask, we have these different applications that really makes our lives easier. For example, MetaMask in the past, you had to have access to Binance, Coinbase, or Kraken in order to buy ETH and then transfer your ETH to MetaMask. But now they have a new integration where you can buy with fiat currency, so euro, dollars, and others directly on MetaMask. So that makes your life way easier. It's an over integration. Obviously, it's not censorship resistant because at the end of the day, we have billions of people around the world that do not have access to traditional bank accounts. So you need to have a credit card or a bank account already to obviously have access to crypto. But I think we're trending in the right direction.
One thing I will say here is you can go to convenience stores here and pay cash to buy crypto.
That's really cool.
So that is really cool. Yes. All right, Ellie, I don't want to keep you too long. So thanks so much again for being here. I've already said I got to say it again. Anything you want to end off with? Any way people can follow you on Twitter or something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So first, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure to talk with you. So much fun. So you guys can follow me on Twitter, 𝕠𝕜𝕒𝕟, 𝕠𝕜𝕒𝕟. So 𝕠𝕜𝕜𝕒𝕟 on Twitter. And also join our Discord chat. We'll be able to discuss anything crypto with our amazing members, just clients. So super excited to talk with you guys.
Thanks everyone for being here and for listening to the podcast. We're going to do this live at some point when a lot of the mechanisms are in place for us to do this live. But for the moment, this is a recorded video that you guys will be watching on YouTube at some point with all the cool graphics. If you're on the podcast, you won't be able to see the videos that, as Ellie was talking about Maker, you get to see the Maker stuff. So you might want to have and check that out maybe in about a month's time or so. And as Ali said, please follow us on Discord. Please follow us on Telegram. Please follow us on Twitter. You see this over here at @AMUNTOKENS. Follow us there. We also have a Reddit now. So it's Reddit/r-AmunTokens as well. We're going to be coming up with more socials in the future. Keep an eye out for that. And we will be back next week around about the same time. I might be in luck to record next week's episode on Friday. We'll have to see. I'm still sort of working out the logistics. But thanks again, and we will see you guys next week. And hopefully we can have Ellie on again a few weeks in the future, talk about new things, news, whatever he wants to talk about. That would be fantastic as well.
Super cool. Super cool. Thanks for having me.
No problem, and we will see everyone later.
Bye.